here's what you're going to start with the Tau Empire pulse rifle. What I've got in front of me, like I said, is the pink sheet of extruded polystyrene. You can buy it from any kind of local hardware store. This particular stuff I got here, I'm thinking it's either about 1/2 inch or 5/8 inch thick. I don't really remember. If you go back to last season's episode where we built the buildings for Monster Apocalypse, it's the same stuff I used back then, and back then I knew what the thickness was. So it's either 5/8 or 1/2 inch, one of the two. And I've gone ahead now and traced out the basic shape of the pulse rifle. The last thing you want to have laid out is a third part to the pulse rifle. It's not part of the main gun. It's basically the fancy little laser sight or whatever type of sighting system they use. So a rectangle of 4 inches by 2 7/8 inches. And there's also 2 little nodules that kind of extend out beyond that. And also another small little rectangle that's 4 inches long by about 3/4 of an inch for purposes of attaching the sight to the main gun barrel. Now the next step is go ahead and start cutting this thing out. Now you can get a clean cut by using one of these things. It's a foam cutter. I've used it before. I've used it a couple episodes. Of course, when you want to use these things, you want to take it outside because melting styrofoam or, well, whatever this extruded polystyrene stuff is, produces toxic vapors you don't want to breathe in. So don't do this inside. And I guess if you really want to be extra paranoid, you get one of these guys on that I've used in the past before. My good old trusty little gas mask kind of thing. It's the type of mask you'd use in any kind of paint plans or any kind of chemical applications. We're back from outside, and we've got the basic outlines of the shapes cut out. If I hold them up here, you can see here's about one side of the pulse rifle. This is going to become the other side. And then here's the 2 little pieces that are going to make up the sight. Let me hold up, get a little closer look over here. So at this point, what we're going to do is the next step of this build process is to actually start engraving the details into the pulse rifle. But yeah, if you look at the close-up of the pulse rifle, you can see lots of little lines and little spots in there that it's kind of all cut out and things. So that's what I'm going to do now is trace those lines out and then not cut all the way through, just use the cutter to engrave into them. Hold up one side into the lamp, and that stuff happens. You can see I've taken the Sharpie, kind of drawn out approximately where all the lines are. It's not a complex design in a Tau pulse rifle. I'm sure you could get a little more intricate if you wanted to, but this is just basic. It's all basic ideas. And to make sure you engrave the right sides of the rifle, what you want to do is go ahead and put the 2 halves of the rifle together as if you're going to assemble it. And if both halves or both sides have the engravings on it, then you know you marked up the right sides. If both sides don't have the engravings on it, you screwed up, go back and do it again instead of finding out later after you've already done all the engravings. Okay, I just finished up the step of engraving the pulse rifle. Let me just hold it up here, and you can see I've got little grooves cut into the side of the styrofoam right here. It actually looks pretty nice. I want to show you one neat little trick I found out when I was out there using the foam cutter. I don't have it on right now just because I don't want to use it inside. So I can... Don't do that when it's on. That's a bad thing to touch it when it's on. But what you want to do, I found instead of doing this where you just use the very tip and slowly move it through, what you have to be very careful, it kind of bends the wire a little bit. Let me move it up really close here. If you can burn it in kind of lengthwise along the engraving, and therefore it's only going to go in maybe about 1/8 of an inch where you want it to go in, and you get a nice perfect straight line going in. Now we want to go ahead and glue the whole thing together, glue the 2 halves together anyway. So let's place the 2 engraved sides down and line the pulse rifle up top-wise again, but this time the engraved sides are down. So we're going to put glue on the inside here. I'm just using some basic white glue. Just spread at least some glue down on one side of the pulse rifle, like this. To spread it out, you can use a paintbrush. I don't know where my paintbrushes are right now. I just moved to a new apartment. So I'm going to take a little plastic bag over my hand and spread it with that. Take the other side of the pulse rifle, line up as best you can. Like I said, it's probably not going to be perfect because you're not going to, when you originally cut out the basic shapes, it's probably not going to be an exact match. Do your best to line up the engraved lines almost perfectly. At this point, we're just going to let it go for maybe an hour or so, let it dry. We're going to come back and show you about how you go about painting it up. Here's where things start getting tricky. You can try to paint this directly. It's not going to work very well. For whatever reason, paint just doesn't stick to this surface of this type of extruded polystyrene very well. So, what you're going to want to do is actually, as I did back with the Monster Apocalypse buildings, we use the same material, add a very thin layer of white glue on all the sides. This will then, when the very thin layer of white glue dries, it'll be a very hard plastic layer that you can actually paint onto and start applying the colors to it. So as we did when we were gluing this thing together, I'm only going to apply a small amount of glue, not as much, because I'm more interested in spreading out a very thin layer that's going to dry relatively quick. It took some time here, and I went ahead and let the glue dry a little bit. Just a little bit wet, but a lot of it's covered, so got a nice thin covering over the course of the entire pulse rifle side. First things we're actually going to do is paint in all the little grooves and things we cut out, or the engravings, and give them a very black look, so they're going to look a little more deeper, darker and recessed than the rest of it. So I'm just using some pretty basic poster paint here. You can find this stuff at just about any arts and craft store for pretty cheap. Just taking a kind of a, not really even that detailed of a brush, and you don't have to be even all that particular with it. Just run paint in all the little engravings. So here we go, with the engravings are all colored in. It's a nice deep black color. So you see it's a little bit sloppy, but that's alright. We can deal with that later. Now we're down to the last few steps here of finishing up your Tau Empire pulse rifle replica. As I lift this up here, you can see all the little engraved areas now filled in with black. And it's time to go over and give the rest of the body a base coat of just kind of a gray color. So we're just using some white and some black poster paints, nothing fancy here. We want to use proportionately more white because we're trying to go for a gray color, and just a little bit of black tends to really make things dark. Just mix it up. I'm going to be using a 1-inch brush I picked up from a local store for about 89 cents. Very simple, very basic brush. So here I am now. I'm going to go ahead and run the pins through the laser sight as I said I was, and going to pin it down into the actual body of the pulse rifle. So I'm just putting 2 little holes in the top of the laser sight. And there we go, just like that. Take the first nail, we're going to stick it in the hole I just did, and using this screwdriver, we're going to push it down a little bit further, just like that. Bunk. It all falls over on me. So essentially, using that screwdriver, what I did is I just drove the nail down in a little bit further than below the surface. I'll show you what in just a moment. Let me put the other one in first, so we get a nice solid hold. Now we've got the nearly complete Tau pulse rifle sitting in front of me here. It's got a pretty good shade of base coat gray on it. And what I want to do now is add a little bit of metallic look to it. So that's why I got this sitting over here. It's basically some silver metallic finish spray paint. So I'm going to take this thing outside, hit it with a relatively light coat so that I don't cover up a lot of the etchings. If I do end up covering up the etchings, not a big deal. We'll fix it up in the very last step. But I'm just going to take this outside, hit it with a light coat of this metallic silver, and we'll give it a kind of a little bit of metallic shimmering look to this pulse rifle.
The Tabletop Battlefield is copyright 2007-2009 by Jason Rutherford and is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial License.
The intro music Down With Everything is by The Transfer and is acquired from www.podsafido.com and is used under a Creative Commons license.